APC meeting, Administration and Projects Committee meeting. Madam Clerk, if you can call the roll.
Commissioner Fideli,
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez Thorpe,
Here.
Acting Chair or Acting Vice Chair Haskew, here. And Commissioner Arnridge.
Here.
Okay, we can move forward with the meeting with the members present.
All right, thank you. Is this where we play the video?
This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
All right, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We're at public comments, and these are comments from members of the public are invited to address the committee regarding any item that is not listed on the agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comments?
We've received no public comments.
Anybody in the audience wish to make a public comment? If not, we'll move on to consent calendar. Are there any items to be pulled?
I just have a question. This is for Brian. I appreciate the report for our 9-month. And it looks great. But what I was looking for is one sentence, and I want to hear it from you. We're on track and everything is good. Because it wasn't in the report. Sorry.
Yes, from a fiscal perspective, everything seems to be trending the right way. Obviously, the number one thing is the sales tax revenue. In addition, we're going to be exceeding our budget based off of some current revenue projections from HDL. Our budget is 117 million. We might be around 120, 121 if we're really pushing it. And then as far as, the biggest component we have now is the grant revenues, and the grant revenues are on track, and we're doing that as well.
Fantastic. I love hearing that. By the way. It just, doesn't that sound good? On time, on budget, all of those things. So with that, I'd be willing to move the consent calendar as presented.
All right.
Yes.
And I just had a question on H to Brian. We talked a little bit before the meeting as well on the investment policy of CCTA. Just whether or not the full board has ever or will ever or does talk about the full investment policy going forward, or
In years past, we've brought in our investment team and we've talked about potential changes to the investment policy, but we've always stayed on the conservative side, keeping all of our investments more in guaranteed investments. Probably 60 to 70% is all US Treasuries or more. And we haven't diverted away from that, but I'd be more than welcome to bring them in and have a discussion on just our investment policy and some of our performance measures and how we internally, how I kind of track it and I don't really make decisions on my own. I work with them. One thing we've done over the last couple of years with interest rates is extended our portfolio with the treasury so that we can have some more guaranteed. So we've been selling some 0.25%, buying some 4.5%, 4.75% securities and stuff like that, and looking to hold them into the longer term so that we can generate more investment returns.
Thank you.
So I would just add a comment. We, since there are no changes, that's why it's consent. If there were any proposed changes, then it comes to a regular agenda item. So.
And just being by yourself reading about it, it gets lonely, you know?
Yeah, it does.
So just knowing that it does happen from time to time is all I wanted to know. Yeah, thank you.
I'm always welcome to take calls, you know.
Thank you.
I'm like Tom Bodett. I leave a lot on.
Okay.
Any other questions? Is there a second? All right. There's a motion by Commissioner Arnott, seconded by Commissioner Haskew. Is this a roll call? Roll call vote, please?
Commissioner Arnrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Fideli,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Haskew. Aye. And Acting Chair Hernandez Thorpe.
Aye.
The motion passes unanimously.
All right, regular agenda items, 4A, legislative update. I'll turn it over to Mrs. Johnson.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. It's my pleasure to introduce Mark Watts to provide our state legislative update this morning.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Lindy, for introducing me. So I want to start again, like I have been recently, with where we are in the process. This thing sticks out pretty far, pardon me. The most recent deadline that we passed, April 26th, was the deadline for most bills to have made it out of their policy committees. And so anything that got left behind is non-viable for the rest of the year. It would have to be reintroduced next year. Tomorrow will be the deadline for bills that did not have a fiscal effect. Those are just some strictly policy bills. So that's that deadline. There's not usually a lot of those, but they're usually held at the end of the process. And then on the 17th of May will be the last day for appropriation bills to be heard. And that leads into the 24th, which is the final date by which any bill introduced has to have moved to the next house or its two is dead. So it's a crunch between April 26th and May 24th to move all these bills through the process. So having a birthday in April, I've always disliked having my birthday in the middle of April because the intense pressure has been crazy. And then you add to that tax day. So that's my own personal problem. So I'm going to move on. A couple of items. I was going to talk first about, or just kind of a reminder on SB 1031. I'm not going to talk about anything that's gone on with the bill other than to mention it did pass the Transportation and Revenue Tax Committees the same day, back on the 24th, and is now in Senate Appropriations, waiting to be heard. And I think amendments that have been committed to, there's a term sheet, I haven't seen it, will be adopted as part of the appropriations hearing process, because I just checked and they hadn't been amended today. So we'll see see how that goes forward. I was going to talk a little bit about the budget early action agreement that was made back in mid-April. It had some legacy issues attached to it that are coming to fruition nowadays, or this last week. One of the provisions in SB 106, which was the early action budget bill, which made amendments to the 2023, 24 budget, and added some language that allowed the Department of Finance and the administration to hold off on disbursements or freeze disbursements for projects where the allocation had been made, but it hadn't been expended. And that's really dramatically impacting programs that are reimbursable programs. Because if you've gone ahead and expended and you're waiting for the disbursement from the state for a grant that you won, they're going to hold on to those dollars until there's a budget deal to see if they need it to close the budget. So at this point, what's in play that affects this organization and other transportation agencies is the announcement that the TIRCP funds, the Transit Intercity Rail Program funds, where $2.4 billion in general fund had been appropriated 2 years ago, continued into this year, and is was being made available for awards and allocations. That's one of the ones that's being held up. So the freeze does apply to the full 2.4 that is unattached to a reimbursement or a project that's already expended the money. So there's a lot of drama going on across the state. With respect, if you recall, I was here for the board meeting where you adopted positions on a number of bills, or several bills. And I've been working with Ms. Johnson to get letters prepared with all the bills that we were looking at in appropriations. We think we have the ability to get your positions that you adopted into the hands of the author and the committee in appropriations next week sometime. So that brings my presentation to a close, and I'd be happy to answer questions.
All right, any questions? Commissioner Arnett?
Mark, thank you. You know, when you hear the budget, you know, we have we call it the CBO, or the Office of the Budget, not the Finance Department, because they are really part of the governor. You know, so they're aligned with that. But so they come out, we were in the high 70s short. Governor comes out immediately and says, oh, we're only half that, 38. But 100% of the difference is being made up by stealing the money out of the previous budget. But publicly it says, there's not enough money on the planet to cover the 78 billion, even if they use 100% of the reserve, right? So, and it's actually worse. So if they save the money now from that, they still owe it. So it just carries it forward. And, you know, we're maybe seeing locally a 2% increase in sales tax, but statewide it's predicted to be 0. And probably incomes maybe down a little bit. So, I mean, is this just the exit strategy to get us through this? I mean, this is the worst smoke and mirrors deception I've ever seen, and everybody sort of seems okay with it. We still have 2,600 something bills. The world's great. It's a disaster. I mean, is there anybody there that's realistically going to figure out how to solve this?
Well, I've got two comments. One, the Legislative Analyst's Office is more of the truth sayer in the process, in my view, but still, as you point out, it's still a large gap in what they've described. It's a huge gap in what they described compared to the governor's. So where the rubber meets the road in the budget process is if they put together a budget with true smoke and mirrors that won't last for a 2-year span or maybe a 3-year span, Wall Street comes into play, and they're the ones who lay the law down on terms of how they're going to paper over movement of cash around, and they'll put the limits on it. I think that's where the next month and a half, we're going to see, for the first time since the majority vote budget was put together or was authorized by the initiative process, we're going to see some really angst in Sacramento, I believe, as they try to put the budget together with the banks and Wall Street looking over their shoulders saying, you got to be careful.
Well, that's good to hear. Thank you for that, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? So the only question I have is if you can just, the mechanics of what's happening with 1031, SB 1030. So you're saying it's in appropriations now.
Correct.
So what happens there, and then what happens after that?
Under political science theory, the bill would be reviewed. The cost estimate of the impact and the revenue pieces of the bill would be what is focused on in appropriations, not whether it's the right thing to do, whether you know, it's how do you pay for stuff. So if they have a plausible program that's supported by the region, I can see that being getting okayed and moving forward. I keep hearing rumors that the regional support is not 100% and it's starting to crack, fracture. So I think that's where the leadership and the role that the new pro tem and the new budget chair and with Mr. Wiener's experience, do they cobble something together? I don't mean it to sound that way, that's not the right term. But do they generate the support just to go ahead and put the bill out to keep it moving as a point in progress bill, get it to the other house and try to finalize an agreement there. So I think there's going to be a lot of leniency to say, keep the bill moving because we'll take care of it when it gets to the other house and has to come back.
So it'll go through appropriations. Whether it goes, so it could die at appropriations.
Correct.
It could go through appropriations. I'm just going through the process, not the whether or not it happens. And then it would go to the Senate for a full vote,
Correct.
and then it moves to the Assembly.
Correct.
Okay. And they do the same thing. And then your analysis is that some of the support around this bill is Tri-Delta Transit took a position last week, and we're opposed to this bill. Unless they're willing to give 100% return to source, which I'm sure that they're not willing to do. And it's because we just fundamentally believe that this is a bailout for San Francisco and their problems, and we shouldn't bear the cost of that. So that's our belief. But I just wanted to understand the mechanics more, just to understand how it gets from one committee to the next committee, because I'm not always clear on that.
Well, sir, you got it very accurately done.
All right, thank you. Tim, you had some.
Well, I can just give maybe a broader update on 1031. So obviously there's a lot of discussions regionally on 1031, and last Friday, MTC presented some more information about 1031 to the BACTA, the Bay Area County Transportation Executive Directors. And basically Santa Clara has taken an opposed position. Sonoma has taken an opposed position. San Mateo has taken an opposed position. San Francisco and Napa have taken support positions, and then Marin, Alameda, Contra Costa have not taken any positions. And so that's kind of where it stands right now. There's a ledge committee on Friday, tomorrow, to further discuss. There was also at the MTC commission meeting, there was obviously a lot of discussion. They actually had an offsite workshop last week as well, and there was still a lot of discussion around the capacity enhancing question of whether the funds could be used to fund capacity enhancing projects. And then obviously there was a huge discussion in terms of the return to source element for the bill. So more to come. I think at the commission meeting, it was not even clear if MTC even supports their own bill at this point. And so I think for us, it's more of a watch and see where this thing goes, and see what kind of shape it takes on. I will say though that amendments were done to the bill. And I think a lot of the consolidation elements of the bill have been cleaned up to where it's not this kind of implied outcome that there's going to be consolidation. And so from what I've heard from some of the transit operators, they do like to see, they like the direction that the language is starting to go to, and relative to the consolidation piece. There's still 70% return to source in the bill. And it doesn't sound like that's going to change or budge from what I can tell. And then I think the last element of this whole thing is just, what's the process? I mean, there's a lot of pieces in this bill. And so I think a big question that we all had as the executive directors is that, if this bill passes, how do we assure that each county is going to get 70% return to source, and what is that return to source going to be? Is it going to be cash? Is it going to be regional benefit? How, and then I think the other big question is how is the transit fiscal cliff going to be shared across the counties? That's the other kind of big question. You know, so for example, like BART, you know, how do they determine which counties will kind of pay for the BART transit fiscal cliff, for example, as well as Muni? Those are the two big ones. Those two alone are close to $500 million in terms of transit fiscal cliff. And I do, but MTC, you know, they did remind the group that, you know, if this thing gets too complicated, then no one's going to support it. And so I think that's a fact that I think we all need to consider. And then the other part of it, I think that they reminded all of us is that, you know, what happens if the bill doesn't pass? You know, and if the bill does not pass, then we're gonna go into a downward spiral in terms of transit in the Bay Area. So there was also a reminder about that as well, in terms of, you know, what the implications are if this bill does not pass.
Tim, those counties you mentioned that opposed, were they opposed or opposed unless amended?
They were, let me just go through, let me check my notes. It's some were straight opposed, some were amended. Let me just hold on to double check really quick. Really quick, hold on.
Would it be helpful to just chime in and share that some of them are also reevaluating their position like this week as well? So Tim will reflect on his notes, but for example, I believe VTA was opposed unless amended, but is considering a full opposed position. And so even those things are slightly in flux.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so Sonoma and was opposed unless amended, VTA was opposed unless amended, and San Mateo was also opposed unless amended.
Any other questions? Nothing? Okie dokie. Thank you, good sir.
Thank you, Mark. I'm happy to introduce Gus Maples of Ty Ginsberg and Associates to provide us with our federal legislative update. Thank you, Gus.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Appropriation season is also in full swing here in Washington, D.C. The House of Representatives officially kicked off the transportation portion of the budget formulation process this week with a hearing with Secretary Buttigieg on Tuesday. Secretary is actually testifying before the Senate Appropriations Committee this morning. Beyond the official agency budget request, members of Congress have been and are for the rest of this week submitting their appropriations and earmark project requests to the committees in their respective House and Senate chambers. On this front, CCTA is requesting funding for a range of projects that includes advancing the Smart Signals program in Antioch and Oakley, also workforce development funding through Gomentum. That's something that we've also discussed in person with Senator Padilla's office. Additionally, supporting the President's budget plan to fully fund the U.S. DOT research and technology programs. This office is run out of the Secretary's internal office at the agency and administers SMART grants as well as other innovative and advanced tech activities within parts of other discretionary grant programs that they administer. We met with this team back in March when Commissioners Arnrich and Hernandez-Thorpe were here in DC advocating for local initiatives. Shifting gears a bit more to the policy side of things, I've been having ongoing discussions since that fly-in with Congressman DeSaulnier's office on governance and revenue issues in the region, how he can be a supporter at the federal level. This is more of a 30,000-foot look, but relates back to that 1031 topic that we were just discussing too. And finally, on the grant front, federal grants, we have pending application for RAISE on the interchange project and also finalizing a mega grant application. We're coordinating congressional support here, cautiously optimistic that we will have a strong showing again, similar to last round on supporting that application too. But back to my point earlier, all the attention this week and even next is on getting projects in and members focused wholly on the appropriations submission process here. That's where things are this week, but happy to answer any questions about this or other issues.
All right, thank you. Any questions? No questions, Gus?
I just, mind if I just chime in really
Oh,
quick?
yeah.
Sorry. Just a quick, maybe fill in some details here. So on the appropriation request, we submitted to Senator Padilla for basically a workforce development curriculum program for Gomentum. So, and that was very supported by their staff. So we met with them individually, and they're highly interested in that work. Senator Padilla is actually a pretty big fan of autonomous vehicles, and so he supports this. And so I think he recognizing some of the pressures that are going on with the AV in California, I'm hoping that this appropriation request will be successful. The other one is with DeSaulnier. We crafted this to basically kind of complement all of the other smart signal appropriation requests that we've done. So just some background, we've done one for La Miranda, there's one for Danville, there's one for Concord, there's one for Walnut Creek, there's one for Pittsburgh. And so I think he just recently funded one for San Ramon. And so he felt kind of from a district perspective that we needed to kind of look at East County and start expanding that program into East County. So that was kind of the impetus of that appropriation request. And then the other one is with Garamendi, and Garamendi is for the Antioch Park and Ride. And so that's being done in conjunction with Mobility Hub. Yeah. So the Antioch Share Mobility Hub. And that's being done in partnership with Tri Delta Transit. So we worked collaboratively and collectively on that. So Gus mentioned the RAISE grant for 684, Mega grant. The other two that I want to mention that we submitted, or one is going to be submitted and another one has been submitted. So we submitted a $25 million request under congestion relief program for the cooperative adaptive rate metering program. So that was submitted a few weeks ago. And then Stephanie's working on Mega, which I think is due next week? Monday? Yeah. So that's been a huge lift. Yeah, that's a huge lift. And then the other one that we're going to be submitting is for innovative financing with the Build America Bureau. And that's going to be for a network of shared mobility hubs and kind of evaluating kind of the P3 opportunities there. And so Stephanie has been extremely busy. She's just been kind of rolling from one grant to another grant. So just really want to point that out. She's been spending a lot of time, nights and weekends, on getting those grants in and getting them in a shape that we feel like will be successful. So thank you to Stephanie and the team for doing that. I think it's really important because these grants are always on top of, all our current workload, and so it's a lot of work when we're trying to pursue these things. And then also thanks to Gus and the the Ty Ginsburg Associate team for helping to promote these grants. That's what it's really going to take, is really the advocacy for each of them.
All right, thank you. Are there any public comments?
We've received no public comments.
Okay, anybody in the audience? Nobody in the audience? Okay, thank you. We will move on to update on External Affairs Department and Strategic Communications Roadmap. Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you, Chair and Commissioners. Give me one moment. I'm just going to share my screen here. Okay. Oh. Sorry about that. All right. Good morning. Thank you. Just making sure that everyone can see my face, which is always nice. And I get to see myself real up close and personal in the morning. All right. Good morning, Chair and Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the Department of External Affairs. I do just want to quickly preface, this is not an update on all of the activities that fall under the Department of External Affairs. For example, this presentation doesn't speak or talk to government relations or the work that kind of happens under that arm. Instead, this is intended to be more of a look back at the strategic roadmap and an update on the work that is being done kind of under the guise of the strategic roadmap, as well as a reflection on the one-on-one meetings that I had upon coming on board with the directors here, and sort of thoughts around activities that might be added to the strategic roadmap to meet the goals of that roadmap. Okay, so just as a quick refresher, in October of 2021, the authority approved a strategic roadmap with these goals to help the public develop a sense of ownership, to connect current work of the agency to what is happening in people's lives, and to establish mechanisms for sustained public involvement in planning for the county's future. And these are certainly still the goals, and I think will continue to be the goals even after 2025, when this period, this roadmap period is ended. We'll certainly be coming back to all of you at that point. So as part of the roadmap, we really identified audiences. And I think this is clearly the audiences that we want to reach here at CCTA, but the roadmap intended to really elevate the general public and the media and to look at new ways to build relationships with those two groups. I am looking to elevate the stakeholder groups in that as well. I think particularly as we embark on the countywide transportation plan, it's important that we acknowledge that really building relationships with stakeholder groups is going to be important, and also that they are incredibly important messengers here in our community. And so I wanted to just sort of highlight as we go through reviewing this roadmap that I do think as we move forward through the rest of this roadmap period, that we definitely elevate stakeholder groups and make sure that part of our outreach is targeted to those groups. So a look at what we've been doing. So on the left-hand side, over these next few slides, you'll sort of see some of the high-level goals of the roadmap. One of them was community engagement. And under that, we've been launching we've launched the summer event series last year that we are now calling the community event series. It'll be ongoing this year. We've updated our About Us video. It's 3 minutes long, and we've been able to promote that. It's out on our YouTube video. It's available on our website. And I think it's a nice refresh of what CCTA has done and where we're headed and what we're doing. We've been doing a lot of new materials and launched a lot of new materials, including many that were used in the summer / a community event series. So we've created postcards, stand-up banners, things that really are assets we can use when we're out in the community that reflect what we've been doing. And again, what our vision is for the future. And then we launched the On the Patio podcast, which I hope many of you have been listening to. There was a recent great episode with our transit providers, where they really gave an overview of the work that they do here in the county. Tim is the host of that. And it's been really great to be able to have that to share on social media, to talk about when we're out in the public. And it's actually gotten some great listens. Some of the episodes have, hundreds of listeners, which is really great. So the next was media relations, which I know is definitely something our chair is really experienced in and has even been providing some assistance in helping us think through our strategy. Overall, we've done pretty well in this way. There's definitely been an increase in media attention on CCTA during this roadmap period. From October through April, which is a period that I took primarily because that's the period of time that I've been on board, so able to track the generated media. We've generated media that is valued at about $200,000. So that's media attention that we didn't pay for, but certainly has a financial value to us. And part of that is about growing relationships with some of our local papers and some of our media outlets that have newscasters and journalists that live here in our community, which has really been a great effort. I also think this is a place where we will continue to grow. And over the next fiscal year, we'll have a full communications and media strategy, which will allow us to kind of have benchmarks for each month of kind of how we want to be interacting with the media, as well as some pretty incredible things we're launching over the next fiscal year that'll give us a lot of reason to be interacting with the media. RMS, which is next week, our Redefining Mobility Summit, is an example of that. We're really excited to have done a pretty large media release for that and are looking forward to having some reporters. We've already heard from the Bay Area News Group, for example, that they're going to be there and they're even going to stay for lunch. So that'll be fun. So social media has been a big priority. We got our Facebook up and running during this roadmap period. It had existed, but we hadn't really been utilizing it or posting much there. And so we've seen a lot of traction there. We do continue to use X, though slightly less, just given that it has had some follower reduction over the last year or two. And we also use LinkedIn quite frequently. It's been really helpful that our staff are pretty active on LinkedIn and they can share things and kind of interact with that work. It's also been a great way for us to build partnerships and to get to know some of the stakeholder groups in our community. So LinkedIn has also been a really positive for the social media gains over this roadmap period. Again, I just sort of picked a period of time that was easy to track given the software that we use to track our social media. And since June 2023, we've gained about 579 new followers and we've posted more than 500 times. And I actually expect that that number will increase over the next fiscal period. So website maintenance and improvement was also a big priority of this roadmap. And I think we've seen a lot of deliverables come down the pipeline in this year, which is pretty exciting. We launched a new homepage. We've launched a press kit, which makes it easy for those media folks to go and find our logo, summaries of our organization, as well as kind of other quick links in a one-shop spot. And we've also launched the Community Input Hub, which is where our 2-minute survey lives. So as we're out in the community during our community event series, we will be asking people to take this 2-minute survey. It's a great way for us to get some quick feedback on priorities. And it's easy for us to take that and break it down through analytics to look at, well, people in this community are responding this way. But it also gives us folks email addresses and allows us to stay in contact with them and create a list of folks who have said that they're interested in what CCTA is doing so that we can continue to follow up. I put 2 pictures here of sort of what those spaces look like. It's kind of been fun to see the analytics grow as more folks are interacting with our homepage, which I think reflects that it was a positive change. Now, technical outreach support wasn't specifically called out in the roadmap, but I wanted to add it to this presentation because I think there is a lot of attention given on how we put forward materials about our projects and making sure that they are aligned with CCTA and the kind of look and feel of CCTA, but it's also an opportunity for us to introduce ourselves. A lot of the time, that's where people first see CCTA, right? They come to the Mokelumne Bridge and they're like, or overcrossing, excuse me, and they're like, oh, wait, who's CCTA? Why is this event happening? And so the materials that we produce in those settings and in those situations are really important because they represent us. And I think there's been a lot of effort in this over the last 6 months, but even over the full roadmap period. One example is the vehicle miles traveled video that we produced in partnership with Stephanie and the team that is working on the Northbound Express Lane project. This is a video that is very relevant to that specific project, but is also evergreen. And we're going to continue to be able to use this video as we go out into the public and answer questions about why aren't you just expanding this highway? Or why aren't you just making this road a bit longer or a bit larger? We might be able to help, answer those questions in a way that makes folks feel more connected to the work when they're able to use multimedia, something like a video, to grasp that concept, as opposed to having to read a lengthy bill language or talk to someone who has expertise and might talk about it in a slightly more sophisticated way. So this is where we are. We kind of really launched the roadmap in 2023 and it goes through 2025. And so we're almost right in the middle. And I think it's been helpful to reflect on all of the different indicators that were kind of brought forward to all of you. And I'm excited to tell you that most of those indicators have been met. We just went through many of them. It's been really great to see a lot of the numbers for website visits, social media go up, and also to see CCTA more in the news and us out more in the public. And I really want to thank all of you as board members for being part of that. Many of you came to summer event series or will be signing up to be part of our community event series, and share these things in your newsletters, repost them on social media, like them, follow them. You help us to get the word out, and I really appreciate that. So over the last 6 months or so, I've had the opportunity to meet with most of you and to reflect on what you all think is really working in regards to strategic communications and where you think we have room to grow. And as such, I've put together a few next steps that I think can be added to our strategy around strategic communications. So those include updating the CCTA brand and brand assets and exploring a deeper cohesion between CCTA and the brands under the CCTA umbrella. This came up, and it's the reason it's the first bullet point. This came up in every conversation that I had with board members. There's a recognition that CCTA has a really great reputation in the community and with the folks that are familiar and aware of it, but it's not maybe as the public is maybe not as aware of CCTA as a brand as we would like them to be. And so there's a conversation about whether the brand itself could be part of that. I actually did a fun exercise with Commissioner Arnrich and Executive Director Hale, where we looked at all of the logos for our local CTAs and said, how quickly does your eye gravitate to Contra Costa Transportation Authority's logo? And the truth is, it takes a minute to see our logo. Part of that is that we use a pretty thin font. Part of it is that we use our full name as opposed to CCTA. Part of it might have to do with blue being a very common color for logos, right? So these are the sort of conversations we look forward to having as we embark on a CCTA branding strategy. I don't know that that means we will fully rebrand. In fact, I think it's very unlikely that we will, but we might try to bring a little bit of cohesion to things like 511, Street Smarts, and the CCTA brand itself, and make it clear that all of those kind of fall under a family of efforts. Likely that might just be through color cohesion, for example. The next thing that came up quite often was the deployment of a database system to really manage our relationships. So as I mentioned, we asked people to take a survey. We're out in the public and we're talking to people and they say like, oh, I'm interested in what CCTA is doing in my community. Well, it's important that we follow up on that. Currently, we keep a very robust email list and that's helpful, but it doesn't allow us to go in and say, oh, I wanna make sure that I reach everyone who lives in Antioch. Or I'd like to go in and have a history of how I've interacted with this stakeholder group. It's somewhat limited to a list of emails. And so we're looking at how we can really build out a more robust system that would allow us to interact more and to have deeper connections with the folks who have asked to be connected to CCTA. We're also interested in producing a shareable publication, such as an e-newsletter for CCTA. This would give us those connections, something for them to share and some way for us to kind of have a fluid relationship with them. This actually was called out in the roadmap, and I'm just bringing it forward as something that I think should continue to be a priority as we move forward. The last one is to increase CCTA's digital footprint through digital marketing. And we've actually done a little bit of this. It's part of why we've seen a little bit of growth on our social media, but it's something I think we can do more of, which is to put out digital ads on things like LinkedIn and Facebook, potentially even on YouTube or through Google Ads, just bringing attention to CCTA and our projects. And because online you can target the population that you're having an ad go to, gives you the ability to really reach folks, particularly in projects in their community, for their feedback. And I think that could be really valuable. So really leveraging the tools that are out there, I think is a big priority for the rest of this roadmap period. I also wanted to talk a little bit about those stakeholder groups and really thinking about how we reach community members that maybe we haven't specifically targeted in the past. And this came up in most of our conversations as well. And folks had some really great suggestions. You all know your communities really well. And that's been really helpful. So one of those is to target outreach to seniors to better illustrate better future mobility options. So to bring things to seniors and say, like, would you ride in this? Would this work for you? As opposed to sort of asking them to come up with the idea. Instead, putting something forward in front of our senior communities and saying, what are we missing here? Or what hesitation might you have? Or what makes you excited about this option? We were recently at the Earth Day event at Rossmore, and a lot of folks came up to us to talk about why autonomous shuttles are something they're excited about. And it was really great to hear that feedback. And a lot of them were excited to go back to their community members who are no longer driving and talk to them about how something like this could work for them in their community. The second one is to reach more students. And you all have initiatives often in your community to work with students or to work with educational entities. So it was really great to hear that and to kind of come up with some ideas in partnership. Some of those ideas were essay contests, summer camps, which we actually explore the potential for a summer camp in that earmark that Executive Director Hale brought up earlier with Senator Padilla, the idea of being able to bring out high school students to Gomentum for a period of a few days and really be part of some of the learnings that happen in that space, as well as a webinars about transportation careers and partnering with some of our nonprofits that really concentrate on work-based learning and bringing some of that forward. We have incredible staff here with robust experience. And one of the areas where they're looking to do a lot of work in recruiting future generations is civil engineering. So just to give you an example, I think that we have a huge resource here in our staff as well as in our board, and it would be great to be able to share that with some of our student population here in Contra Costa County. All right, that is the conclusion of sort of my next steps recommendations and the roadmap itself. It's a great roadmap and I'm really grateful to have gotten to come on board when there was already a bit of a strategic vision and just excited to add to that. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any comments or questions? Commissioner Arnett.
Well, a couple of comments. One, this is fantastic. Lindy, since you come on, you know, CCTA is brighter, but that stutter I just had is our problem. And I think I shared with you, and we all sit on JPAs and things like that. And I've been on one for 15 years. It was called Central Contra Costa Solid Waste Authority. What the heck is that? We rebranded it to Recycle Smart because that's what we do. And people can remember it. They know who we are. And so that direction, while we all know it, but we also have 3CTA, which we had to come up with its own. We are known very well as an agency amongst other agencies here in California. Internationally, we're probably one of the best known agencies in the United States. In the United States, we're known better than most. To our residents, we're not known at all, except for the ones we have direct contact with. Even at Recycle Smart, one of the things we reinvested in is we do a quarterly newsletter. And it has real information. Obviously, it's about picking up trash and recycling, special dates for pickups and things like that. So people really drive towards that. But I think the direction that you're heading, and when Lindy put out all these other logos, we couldn't find ours. It just didn't stuff. But there were about 3 or 4 that jumped off the page. And they were acronyms that meant something, or they were literal words. So I think, you know, we've always struggled with that. And, you know, change is hard. I actually resisted at Central Contra Costa Solid Waste. I resisted the change at first for a variety of reasons. And afterwards you go, gosh, that is so much easier. But the other thing is I think that not only given where we're headed in renewals and stuff, we owe it to the public, to the taxpayers, to inform them what we're doing. So doing a newsletter twice a year, let's say every 6 months, both in digital and some hard copies that we can distribute it. Mailing it is just unbelievably expensive because we cover, you know, 1.2 million people. But I think we owe it to tell people what is going on and make sure that it informs them of something they actually want to know. Like there's a project coming up, there will be delays, please look at this. People look for that and they're interested in it. It's not negative, it's actually a positive, you know, as a leading agency. Locally, nobody except for elected officials understand the connection between GoMentum and CCTA, nobody. So, but it's GoMentum that has risen us and given us the opportunity to have a much more public-facing entity, but there isn't that connection. So I think all the things that you're working on, but you can't do it by yourself. So, you know, we're gonna have to give some more support to you. And it's really, really important. And it isn't, we should never say it's just branding or it's communicating with our taxpayers. Those are our stockholders. And we need to let them know. And it provides a two-way conversation so that by reaching to them, they can reach back to us easier. So well done.
Any other questions, Commissioner Fideli?
Yeah, I just want to say this is a great start. Just really a great litany of things that you're doing and should be done. I've noticed the social media change and I really love the VMT video that's out there. I can point to it and we can all refer to it as to reasons why we're doing things. And the branding, what's interesting that Newell was saying is that many, many years ago, I worked for a different CCTA, the California Cable and Telecommunications Association, which is known in the Capitol. And, you know, and with the changes of media, it's changed, and I was in charge, like your job, in charge of finding a logo for that. And it's changed 2 or 3 times. So it's important to have a logo that's ID'd and known. And I think the newsletter as well is a great idea. I'm very glad that possibly in your next presentation, there will be a designated employee to help you get there. It's very important that you have assistance on this because this is a big load. I have 2 kind of questions. One is, let me just give both of them at once. Well, what might be the role in this effort of the sub-regions? Talk a little bit about that because that's critically important and it gets to the grassroots. And number two, is there a concept of a speakers bureau? Because our executive director can't do it all. And we need to have a body of 2 or 3 people that are willing to go out to schools, to everywhere, to start talking it up to the young people, to the seniors.
So I'm going to take your second question first, because absolutely. And it's actually something that we're including in the community event series this year is we have the request a speaker card, and in the community input hub, we have a request a speaker space, because that's not something that we've done a lot of, but it is a great way to reach those stakeholder groups, right? And to invite yourself to them in a sense. I think that you're absolutely right that we need more than perhaps just Executive Director Hale's capacity to do that. I really love that kind of experience. So I'm excited that I'm hoping that some people sign up just so that I can go out and talk to some community groups. It's something I find really joyful and very fun. But even beside that, I think there'll be some groups who might have very specific expertise or very specific interests, I should say, and look to someone with very specific expertise. And I think that your suggestion that we have maybe kind of a roster of folks who can speak to certain issues is a great one. And I'll certainly take that back and think about exactly how we might craft that, not to call her out. But for example, I think Rashida is an incredible speaker, and I think folks would be lucky to hear from her who are particularly interested in the accessible space.
Any other comments?
I think it's also a different kind of investment in that it leads us forward to the point where we need to go back to the public again in a way that we can ask for funds. And the last time we were frustrated because we didn't have a special project that could get people behind it. But if we share what we do accomplish, it's really important to know that there's a consistency toward improvement all the time. And I think that's what we can sell almost better than anything else right now.
That's a great point. Absolutely. And Commissioner Fidel, I realized I didn't answer your first question. I got excited about Rashida. But I think that absolutely it's important to include them. And I think that we'll probably do so, particularly like with the newsletter, right? And having conversations like help us highlight that work that's happening there, help us think about how we talk about the groups. I think that I haven't thought through, to be totally open with you, exactly what that newsletter will look like in regard to, do we make it a publication that we can share out versus just a digital one? But I think it's a great opportunity to engage with those groups, to include them in how we're communicating broadly. We also definitely thought a lot about geographical equity as we thought about the community event series and ensuring that we're in those communities. And we're very hopeful that you as commissioners will go to those in your community and talk about kind of your dual roles.
Can I just maybe add to that? I think, like we've talked about, Commissioner Fideli, is the RTPCs and the subregions need to be an extension of CCTA, particularly in the community. You know, and so I know that I've talked a lot with the WICTAC staff about, you know, hey, when you're out in the community, you shouldn't be out in the community as WICTAC. You should be out in the community as CCTA, you know? And so, and as the RTPCs are out in the community and the subregions are out in the community, like we need everyone waving the CCTA flag. You know, I think this community outreach from a speakers bureau standpoint, it just doesn't come down to just 2 or 3 individuals. It really comes down to everyone that really needs to be part and kind of raising the flag here. I think this is done through coalition building, you know, and getting everyone together to carry on that message, you know, from CCTA to all of our commissioners. You know, we talk a lot about that. Our commissioners here at CCTA have a unique role of being an ambassador in the community, you know, for transportation, for CCTA. And then I think the RTPCs kind of share that same role, you know, in terms of sharing that out there in the community. And I think the fact that Director Johnson is elevating the stakeholders, that's another key voice. You know, we need a lot of people out there banging our drum and sharing our message and sharing our talking points, because it can't come just to CCTA doing this. We'll never achieve that goal. It has to be everyone that's really banging the drum about CCTA and transportation. So I think from your standpoint, from the subregions, like I think the newsletter is a good thing, but I think also making sure we create a much larger coalition to speak about CCTA.
And I think that exercise of working with the sub helps the whole entity. Makes us stronger. And you're right, we need to get the word down locally that there's a broader effort here, broader goal than just local. So, thank you.
And all great news. Is there any public comment?
I've received no public comment.
Okay, anybody in the audience? Seeing none. Thank you, Mrs. Johnson, for your outstanding report. Item 4C, organizational assessment findings, and why am I forgetting your last name, Terry Ann? Mrs. Grover.
Like Glover, but Grover.
Say again.
Great presentation, Lydia. That's going to be a hard act to follow.
Yeah.
So just a little bit of background, and I apologize, this is probably going to be a long presentation. Well, in July 2023, we started conducting an organizational assessment. I'll refer to it as a study for the remainder of the presentation. This study focused on evaluating the authority's current structure and operations with a focus on aligning them with the industry best practices and future goals such as CCTA 4.0 and transportation efficiency through the digital road manager, enhancing accessibility and equity, succession planning, and staff development. The study also performed a needs and gaps analysis to identify areas for improvement, which will be discussed on the next slide. It consisted of 15 interviews with the directors, key staff, and our program and project management consultant at Advanced Mobility Group, and an employee survey that had an 86% response rate. The results were generally that we had a positive organizational culture with a call for improving communications, recognition for quality performance, and consultant management. The study also consisted of peer learning and best practices research from 11 comparator agencies that had similar goals and responsibilities of planning, funding, and delivering transportation projects and programs, and had some operational experience. The study determined that each agency had similarities and differences that made them unique, and that CCTA, like the others, needed to develop a unique structure that best serves its future goals. The study provided an implementation action plan with the following key recommendations to address the identified gaps, which I will talk about in future slides. These gaps were improving internal communications, organizational development and staffing, a sustainable leadership structure, consultant management, and best practices, and development of a CCTA 4.0 strategy and staffing plan. Internal communications can be improved across departments and from the top down by establishing periodic communications from the executive director and establishment of an intranet for information sharing. Currently, I'm in the process of developing an intranet and benefits intranet for information sharing with staff and a way to build relationships and internal communications. Oops, sorry, I keep going the wrong way. To ensure organizational development, staffing growth, and succession planning, the study recommended that we address current vacancies promptly. We have 25 total full-time equivalent positions and have filled 24 of them, 3 since February. We have 1 vacancy, being the Deputy Executive Director for Projects. It is also recommended that we explore opportunities to cultivate and advance career development for our current staff through project-based teams, training, peer-to-peer coaching, mentorships, and career ladders for promotional opportunities. Adding these additional classifications will allow for staff development and succession planning, as well as ensure we have the proper positions in place to support our future goals. The executive director oversees 6 departments. Planning and projects are led by deputies when they're filled. The programs, external affairs, and administration departments are led by directors, and the finance department is led by the chief financial officer. Currently, 7 directors, the CFO, and an engineering manager report directly to the executive director. This slide shows the proposed organizational structure. Current positions are shown in gray. The study is recommending introducing 8 new classifications and reclassifying 2 deputy classifications, and these are shown in yellow. The additional classifications will provide career ladders, address the additional workloads, changing needs, and staffing for the CCTA 4.0 initiative. Currently, finance has 6 FTEs and 5 classifications. There are no proposed changes for the finance department. With the recent additions of a finance manager and contracts manager, the department is running well as staffed. We are proposing the addition of 2 FTEs, which would bring the total to 27 FTEs. All recommended positions would be full-time staff. The additional classifications will be evaluated in the total compensation study. I will discuss the proposed recommendations for each department over the next few slides. So for the projects department, they're responsible for successful delivery of the authority's capital improvement program, construction management, and innovative mobility programs such as Innovate 680 and shared mobility hubs. And then projects that are identified in the expenditure plan, as well as projects funded from grants and other outside sources. Currently, the projects department has 5 classifications and 7 FTEs with 1 vacancy in the deputy position. The creation of 3 new classifications is recommended: a director of operations and technology, an operations manager, and an operations technician. It is recommended that the deputy executive director position be filled and reclassified to the deputy executive director for projects and operations to oversee this new operations division and staffing. This deputy position is currently approved in the salary and benefits schedule, but we are developing a revised job description to add operational oversight. The 3 new classifications and division would provide technical and managerial oversight and support CCTA becoming the digital road manager for Contra Costa County, handling the day-to-day operations of the 3 domains of digital asset management, digital traffic management, including the countywide connected data center, and system operator and performance monitoring, as well as digital construction. These classifications would be established now, but not be filled until a future need arises to support the CCTA 4.0 initiative, and the board has approved the additional FTEs. They did evaluate an additional deputy to oversee operations and technology, but felt that CCTA was too small to support the need for 3 deputies and that the other deputy positions would be more effective. The External Affairs Department has 1 FTE, as we just noted in the previous presentation, and classification with a director who oversees management of the authority's government relations and legislative activities, development and management of public outreach, and complex strategic and technical support to the executive director. Expansion of this department would allow the director to focus more on high-level community engagement, coalition building, internal communication, government relations, and legislative activities. The creation of 1 new classification is recommended, a communication specialist. This new classification would support the expanding communications and engagement strategies in the communication strategic plan roadmap and act as boots on the ground and technical outreach, supporting projects, programs, and plans in the community to garner public outreach and engagement. The filling of and adding 1 additional FTE for this position will be evaluated in the total compensation study. It is also recommended that the director position classification be updated to incorporate internal communications as it relates to projects, programs, and plans. The administration department currently has 5 FTEs and 3 classifications. The director provides administrative, operational, and programmatic support to the authority, serves as the clerk of the board, provides human resource and risk management, facility management function, administers the authority's records management program, and oversees legal services and compliance, and provides technical and complex support to the executive director. There is a large gap and disparity in the administration department between the director and administrative assistant positions that needs to be filled to support higher level human resource and administrative duties. The creation of 3 new classifications is recommended to support the directors: an administrative services manager, deputy clerk, and administrative analyst. The administrative services manager would assist the director with policy development and maintenance, human resource support in areas such as recruitments, open enrollment, onboarding and offboarding, benefits enrollments, wellness programs, employee assistance programs, and facilities. A deputy clerk would act as a backup to the clerk of the board, assisting with training, Form 700s, board and committee agenda management, public records requests, ADA policies and requests, and records management to ensure a balanced organizational structure, operational efficiency, and functionality. An administrative analyst will provide higher level analytical and technical support with coding, reporting, accountability, administering and maintaining software as a system platforms, and providing a more data intensive support role. These positions will support succession planning goals. We will evaluate promoting, reclassifying an administrative assistant to a deputy clerk and potentially an administrative analyst. This would provide opportunities to the administrative staff to develop new skills and take on new roles. There is funding in the budget for staff training and development and the ability to attend educational conferences. And I am fully committed to providing the training and mentorship for these roles. The filling of administrative services manager position will be evaluated in the total compensation study. The programs department is responsible for the oversight and authority level management of several transportation programs, including transportation demand management, ferry feasibility studies, the integrated transit plan, paratransit programs, and the evolving accessibility and equity goals of the accessible transportation strategic plan, and forming and seating a coordinated entity. This department has 2 classifications and 2 FTEs. It is recommended that the programs department be moved under the Deputy Executive Director for Planning, Programs and Policy, with the Director of Mobility Programs reporting to this this deputy. This is dictated on the slide with a bold line. This would streamline operational efficiency, allow for a better collaboration, and align goals for alternative modes of transportation and programs. The creation of 1 new classification is recommended, an assistant programs manager. And this position would support the new coordinated entity and the growing programs. The planning department has primary responsibility for planning, organizing, and directing the planning activities of the authority, overseeing the growth management and congestion management programs, and all related technical work. It has 3 FTEs and 3 classifications. With the implementation of the countywide transportation plan, policy making, and stepping more into a regulatory role, there is a need to expand the planning role in the organization, such as project identification and project performance monitoring. With the digital manager role proposed in CCTA 4.0, there is data analytics roles and leveraging the system monitoring forms to manage key performance indicators, return on investments, and grant management, which would be led by the deputy. It is recommended that we fill the Deputy Executive Director for Planning and reclassify it to a Deputy Executive Director for Planning, Programs, and Policy, and evaluate adding 1 FTE for this deputy position in the total compensation study. This slide also reflects the change presented under the Programs Department. Filling the deputy position would streamline operational efficiency for both planning and programs initiatives. Policy is being added to encompass a greater role in the development and implementation of policies in the expenditure plan, integrated transit plan, and transportation fund for clean air policy, to name a few. The creation of 2 new classifications is recommended, a principal transportation planner and data analyst/scientist to support data analytics and adaptation to evolving planning paradigms. The data analyst/scientist will collect, transform, and organize data in order to draw conclusions, make predictions, and drive informed decision-making. The principal transportation planner will be used for succession planning and higher level planning support to the deputy when identifying priorities and overseeing implementation of the plans. I will now transition to the next key recommendations for developing a sustainable leadership structure. The study evaluated the makeup of the executive team and analyzed the deputy model versus a chief operating officer model to support the executive director, and recommended defining a clear and sustainable executive team that includes 2 deputy positions to ensure the proper expertise for each department. Currently, the executive director has 9 direct reports. The study recommended reducing the executive director's span of control to 5 direct reports. The executive team will be defined as 2 deputy positions, the chief financial officer and the directors for external affairs and administration. This would streamline decision-making and operational efficiency by adding capacity to the leadership team. The next key recommendation was improving consultant management. The study evaluated our use of consultants as compared to similar agencies. It is recommended that clear expectations and best practices be developed to help guide staff in the management of their consultants, such as better oversight, accountability, ownership, and annual performance reviews. It was also recommended that a portal be developed to better manage contracts and consultants. Our contracts manager is currently developing a contracts management portal to meet this goal. The study further recommended developing an annual staffing plan to ensure a balanced approach for job duties performed in-house by CCTA staff versus consultants. The staffing plan would allow us to maximize our in-house resources and ensure we have the right staff and skills in place to conduct these duties. Next key recommendation focuses on the evaluation of CCTA 4.0. Based on the direction CCTA wants to go, the study recommended developing a communications and engagement strategy to advance CCTA 4.0. This initiative needs to garner support and understanding with both internal and external stakeholders. It was also recommended that a strategy and staffing plan for CCTA 4.0 be developed to ensure we have the right approach and staffing in place to meet the future needs and challenges that this initiative may bring. Currently, the strategic plan is already underway. The next steps include completing the total compensation study and the next 3-year total compensation plan, which expires at the end of June and includes the publicly available pay schedule. The recommendations from the study will be evaluated in the total compensation study. It will include the 8 recommended new classifications and 2 reclassifications to allow for development of job descriptions and salary and benefits benchmarking to ensure they align with CCTA's proposed organizational structure. Any recommendations from this study, such as additional FTEs, will be evaluated with the total compensation study and brought back to the board. And this will also include the request for adding these classifications to the publicly available pay schedule. Currently, the recommendations propose 2 additional FTEs, 1 for the Deputy of Planning, Programs, and Policy, and 1 for the Communication Specialist, and would bring CCTA to a proposed total of 27 FTEs. The total compensation study will evaluate the other classifications as presented to determine if they need to be filled, specifically the Administrative Services Manager. We have provided this information to Gallagher and plan to meet with the Salary and Benefits Ad Hoc Committee in May. As part of the total compensation study, staff will evaluate the budget and ensure we have funding for any additional requests for FTEs. In conclusion, the proposed recommendations in the study will realign CCTA's structure to meet future goals, priorities, and initiatives, introduce new classifications to improve operational efficiency and functionality, facilitate staff growth, and ensure succession planning. It will prepare CCTA for future challenges and opportunities. We will be shovel ready, as they like to say in projects. Staff seeks authority board acceptance of the recommendations and draft implementation action plan. As part of the recommendation today, we are not asking for approval of the FTEs. Additional FTEs will be evaluated and considered with the recommendations from the total compensation study. That concludes my presentation, and both Tim and I are available to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation. Questions, comments? Commissioner Arnage?
Well, first of all, Terry, thank you. For 31 slides, that's pretty good. That was actually very fast for that. And as usual, very thorough. Just some clarifications, from public facing, it looks like the request is for 31 positions, right? Because the org chart shows 31. Absent that, that's what you conclude. It's not until the very end that you mention it's not written in this, but the request is only for 2 new FTEs, the deputy and in communications. But it still shows that the real request, go forward, isn't just about talking about 2, it's for 31 or Are we looking at reclassifying positions? So we're showing the existing position and the projected. And if we're doing that, then those need to be graphically done in a way that they look like they're dissolving to go to here. Clearly, there's a mechanism to get there. You know, you have to evaluate the person, interview them. Can they do this new role and title, or do we have to go outside? So that's really part of my question is it really 31 eventually? Or is it reclassifying 4 positions? And so our net is really only eventually going to be 27.
So we're looking at adding 8 new classifications to the salary schedule. However, those positions won't necessarily be filled. They'll be there for career ladders and promotional opportunities to ensure that we have the right structure in place, but they won't necessarily be filled.
Okay, so classifications are not part of an org chart. So when you see the organization chart, that all means bodies. So what makes it a little, you know, I thought, wow, that's eight new people we're adding for a small organization. That is really consultant driven. That it would be better to not mix classifications with positions, right? I mean, so the org chart ought to represent the number of people. And if the chart is going to say it's this, it's going to be upgraded and that. Better not say that as opposed to adding that. Because I think it would all be much clearer to both internal and external facing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think, yeah, just really quick, Terry, and like, so it's confusing because when you see our organizational chart on the website, it's focused on people, right? And so, but Terry Ann and I went through this quite a bit because we needed a way to show how these classifications would fit and report within the organization, you know? And so I think the organizational chart is not intended to be reflective of people. It's more reflective to say the reporting and classifications.
Right.
And so, and I think to your point, it's separating the classifications from the FTEs, you know, and the actual people. And I think that there's kind of,
Not normal.
yeah.
Right, you're having to explain it because it's not normal. So
Yeah.
I'm just suggesting we might, before this goes to the board, tweak this in a way because everybody looks at it says proposed organizational chart. Bodies, right? So no matter what you say, in everybody else's mind, they're still thinking that, looking at that. So maybe you can do that in a way. And you can show it, you're defeasing some positions because they're new. And I think that's okay. I would only say, you know, and I don't mean to pick on Terry Ann, you're a rock star at my book, but you know, under administration, administrative services, it looks like to me we're reclassifying several positions there. But right now it's showing 6 people in that group. 6 people for 27, or maybe it's 31. Again, I don't know how we look at that ratio. That's real heavy. I mean, our organizations, we don't have that. We don't even have that many people, and we got 130 something employees. So I just want to make sure in perspective that we are, and I know with the changes, to be honest, in remote working and things like that, I have seen historically that we can see through other government agencies, remote work has caused administrative support services to go up. It just does by nature. So we might want to evaluate that with this, because if we're saying we need it, are we looking at what's going on now versus if we were in a different circumstance? Because we have a lot of people, I mean, virtually everybody's almost remote. So, you know, that to me ought to be part of this before we go too far down the road. While I support particularly the 2 that we're doing, it just raises some times that gives us the opportunity to think about that and how we do it. Because otherwise the remote working has a tendency, everybody's sending emails all day long to each other. Oh, I need to, you know, we're spending more time on communicating and not doing the work because the remoteness, you know, I can't say, hey, Lindy, could you take care of this today? I'm just going to the restroom and I happen to stop by. it takes a lot more work. While it has its advantages, if there are disadvantages, I would just hope that we look at that as part of this. So, that's it.
Any other questions, comments? Commissioner Fidel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I want to thank Newell because that kind of straightened my thoughts out because the chart looked pretty big and I like the direction headed here. And I think there's some need for delegation and for communications and especially moving toward operations and 4.0 that CCT is moving toward. You needed to make those kind of directional, but it looks like a lot. And I was going to ask 1 year from now, what's the reality of what the changes are going to be before us? And where are we going to get the money to do that? But I agree with our board chair that maybe fine tuning that will be great. This is the study that Baker Tilly assisted us with. Is that correct?
Correct.
So they independently came in and did some of the questions and those kinds of things too. Can you talk a little bit more about the internal communication improvements or what did all that mean? Or because it sounds good just to
Yeah, I think
breathe
just.
more air into any entity.
Yeah, it's more just improving communications across departments. So, within the departments, upon doing the interviews, it was determined the communications are really good, but that we could improve communications across departments. So having, for instance, like an internet portal, that has a benefits portal and just information sharing is going to help improve that. And then just utilizing our all staff meetings more to have presentations from staff and better understand what each other are doing across departments. And then just improving those communications, as Commissioner Arnrich mentioned, with us working remotely and from home, that is a challenge. And so, that's something that we're always focusing on is maintaining those communications and maintaining culture, which is a reason why Tim decided to bring everybody back, 2 days a week, was to ensure that we can continue to build those relationships and communications. So that was another thing that we did earlier this year to help improve the communications as well. And then just maintain the culture. And then also from, leadership down, just making sure that with these new initiatives like CCTA 4.0, which may be hard to grasp or, people just not understanding what that means in the future, just making sure that those initiatives, just all these changes to it, and that those are communicated down and that everybody has a really good understanding of what's going on internally. Well, those will all help support. And then just newsletters and other things that Lindy was mentioning too, internally as well, and externally to help also improve internal communications.
Pretty common improvements that need to be done at any organization.
Yeah.
Right, that need to be enhanced. Just two things here. The total compensation study, is that that will determine whether or not just clarifying the classifications of the jobs that we think we need here. Is that it? Or will it, when it's finished, will it allow us, the board, to approve a couple more jobs? Is that it? You can come with more information about.
Yeah, so the recommendations from the organizational assessment that we add these classifications, then we've gone to Gallagher, who's performing the total compensation study. And now it's like, okay, now you actually have to create job descriptions and make sure that we can make those work, and then also do the salary and benchmarking. So all of that will be done as part of the total compensation study. Because you can't just add a new position. You have to have a job description, you have to benchmark it. So all of that is being done with the study. And then they'll bring forward the recommendations, which we'll present to the Salary and Benefits Ad Hoc Committee next month.
Okay. And is there anything, I'm hearing, a pressure to get more grant assistance. Where would that lie in that chart? Who would be helpful in assisting in getting more grants for CCTA?
So that would actually be in the deputy, so that would be the deputy so right now, the way we do grants is it kind of gets captured across the entire organization, right now. So projects will do grants, planning will do grants, programs will do grants. So that capacity kind of lives within all of our responsibilities, as we kind of look at grants and pursuing grants. And then, and then to prepare the grant, depending on the level of effort, we'll either do that grant in-house, which that typically doesn't happen. But we typically contract with a consultant to prepare the actual grant. So like, for example, that might be Advanced Mobility Group or another consultant. Like, for example, our TIRSIP grant, we actually use the Innovate 680 team. And for this other current innovative financing group, we're using a different consultant. So it really depends on the grant, the scope, what department it lives in. That really depends on how we actually, how we actually prepare the grant and who we use to prepare the grant. But grants are very expensive. It's definitely a strategic decision when we pursue a grant. Typically, depending on the size of the grant, we could spend anywhere from $25,000 all the way up to $400,000.
But will there be more in-house opportunity to focus on grants here rather than contractors, or in the changes, or no?
I don't think so. I think it's more, again, it comes down to the level of effort. Like if it's a 10-page grant, then we might do that in-house, but I think that doing them externally with consultants, and I guess that's the reason. I mean, the reason why we use consultants is because it helps us deal with the kind of the ebbs and flow of our workload. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when we do a grant, it's above our current workload, right? And so, like Stephanie, so it's above our current workload. And so that's where consultants help CCTA the most, is we've got a baseline set of work that we do and capture as part of our staff here at CCTA. But, based on the projects department, the planning department, we're dealing with those peaks and ebbs, right? And so consultants help us with those peaks. And I think that's actually from the organizational assessment, that's why that staffing plan was recommended, was to help better identify where those peaks are at, and how to staff those peaks relative to consultants versus in-house staff.
So thank you, and I appreciate moving quicker on the communications expert to come and assist us moving forward on that. So thank you.
Commissioner
Ask
Haskell.
me, yeah, I kind of got a simple question, which is there any way you can prioritize in the whole picture the next focus? Meaning, we had lots of different shufflings, but I don't know which one's the next most important and where it fits in sort of time-wise and where we move.
Sorry, Terry, I'll just keep on taking your questions. So the priority is essentially establishing the executive team. So that would be the first initial priority. So if you recall, I haven't backfilled my old position, the deputy, and there was a reason why, because I wanted to kind of work with the authority board and kind of set a strategic direction, strategic vision, and based on this organizational assessment, it's clear that that project's classification is now needed to be reclassified to kind of address that kind of new strategic vision. So it was all very strategic in terms of me not backfilling my old position. So I think now that we have good direction, we know where we're going, we know what these classifications will look like. I think the first immediate next step would be to fill the executive team. So that's going to be so both deputies, right? That's the first part. And then I would say and as mentioned in the presentation, one of those deputies is already an approved FTE, and then the other deputy, we're asking for additional FTE. And the reason why we're asking for that additional FTE is just to give more, because you're pulling the programs department underneath the new deputy and just giving more depth to the planning department overall, given the strategic direction we're going. It's to add another person to the planning team, essentially. And then obviously the other strategic kind of priority would be the community specialist position. So those would be like the immediate kind of next positions to fill, and then I think from there, these other positions that are in there, I think are primarily to allow for, internal promotions, succession planning, career ladders. I will say though, that the director of technology innovation operations and the operations manager, operations technician, I think all of that will come out of the CCTA 4.0 strategic plan and staffing plan. And some of those positions, you know, until we have a sustainable revenue source to fund operations, that's when we would talk about adding those positions, is when we have a sustainable revenue source. Because I think that's the biggest concern that we all have about this strategic vision is how are we going to pay for it? How are we going to pay for operations? You know, and so as we talk about doing this kind of digital road manager, we all recognize that there's you know, revenue that needs to pay for that, you know, and so and that most likely probably won't happen until we probably consider and hopefully pass a future measure, you know, and so so there's kind of three parts to your question in terms of those are the immediate: succession planning, career ladder, internal classifications. And then you have like there are some additional FTEs I think that are out there, but until we have a better sense of revenue, funding, staffing, all those things, we won't even consider those things for a while.
Thank you very much for giving my question more intelligence than it deserves.
Well, any other comments?
Well, I would just say, you know, given what's been heard, I would hope that the suggestion is to tweak this, the presentation itself a bit so that the graphics get to the conclusion. There's the high level view, the detailed view is, and again, it doesn't say it in there anyway, it's only verbal, that the request at this time is only for 2 additional FTEs. Doesn't say that. We all kind of know it now, but it ought to say that in there. And again, that chart with 31, you know, you can graphically show it as defeasing, like dotting in positions that are old titles that we are not going to have, while we have, you know, it's a classifications chart versus a body. I mean, that really needs to be, because I'm sure every one of us had that same feeling, yeah, because it's not been done any other way. That's what we're used to. So I would say as a norm, we need to acknowledge that and then show it in a way. So you could dot in the,
It could be in the same box, slash, and then you're showing.
yeah, how you're upgrading.
Career
I mean,
ladder.
just graphically, you can do it, you can combine it, whatever, but just do it in a way that everybody understands what it means, because it is confusing. But thank you, Brett.
Okay, okay. Are there any public comments related to this matter?
We received no public comments.
No public comments on Zoom, and then nobody in the room. Thank you, Ms. Grover.
Do we need to take an action to accept the report?
Oh, this, to accept the implementation action plan. Is there a motion?
So moved with those comments.
I second.
All right, there's a motion by Commissioner Arnett, seconded by Commissioner Fideli. Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Arnrich,
Aye.
Commissioner Fideli,
Aye.
Acting Vice Chair Haskew,
I,
Acting Chair Hernandez Thorpe,
Aye.
and the motion passes unanimously.
Okay, correspondence and future communications. We have any commissioner and staff communications? Any communications from the committee? None. I'll just say that these 3 items today were very, very important.
Yes.
They're the building blocks of our future. So I was very pleased to see all this. And have much to, I think I feel like I talk to you all the time, so I didn't have much to say, but I think you know what I believe and certainly support your efforts. So thank you for all that. Executive team.
Just one comment. We have our Redefine Mobility Summit on Tuesday. Got to have a very exciting program, I think, that we brought as part of the Redefine Mobility Summit. We've got 4 panels. One panel is on basically kind of continuing to kind of focus on community engagement, public trust around new emerging mobility options and technology, kind of getting over that conversation around how do we communicate with the public and about autonomous vehicles and technology. The other one's on workforce development, so planning on really showcasing a lot of what we're doing there and kind of best practices across the country. The third one is on kind of that whole digital manager conversation. We call it the control room and how we're connecting communities through data. And then the last one is focused on transit. And kind of looking at the value proposition for transit, and so we're bringing in speakers from all over the country. FTA is actually going to be speaking at the conference, so we're excited about that. And then obviously we're going to be having our demonstration zone, so we'll have multiple partners out there demoing some of their technologies. Glideways will be unveiling their new vehicle at the summit. So we're looking forward to hopefully get some press coverage around that. And then obviously we'll be inviting all the students back. So 65 students, and we'll be doing the huge student showcases we normally have with Barry Leeds. And so, I think we're almost sold out, right? Pretty close to sold out, I think. Yeah. So excited for that as well. So if you have time on Tuesday, stop in and kind of check out the summit.
All right, good work. Other business? Seeing none, we are adjourned at 10:06.